It really was the first modern Disney heroine, Disney princess, who doesn't want to be a princess, who doesn't really care about finding the prince. Someone who's more interested in books and seeing the world and kind of figuring out who she is than in finding a guy and getting married. She happens to do those things by the end, but it's not because that's her main interest. So that was really, a bit of a cultural leap. Certainly in the world of children's stories, and I think that's what's so interesting now is it's 25 years later, and it's often things that are slightly revolutionary become, you sort of lose a sense of how groundbreaking they were because they were so influential that they just become part of the culture. How do you distinguish Belle again 25 years later in a live action way, and I think that was so much a part of the casting of Emma Watson, because I do think of all the actresses her age, of her generation, she is the one who sort of most closely defined with women's issues, her activism at the UN, but in general, it's really become her life's mission, So it was very exciting. I remember writing her a note and kind of pointing out that, choices that actors make in their careers sort of become part of their own autobiography, and that this seemed to have such a great fit in her life that I was hoping she was interested. Turned out she had been interested for years, had been developing her own version of it, and what was then so exciting when she got on board was to work together with her. Well, I think obviously, yes, there's a great relevance. Belle's position, there's a great relevance in Belle and the treatment of Belle as a Disney heroine, somebody who is not so interested in finding the prince, more interested in developing herself and reading and figuring out what's going on in the world, But also, I think the general theme is one that was relevant then, it was relevant when the story was written in the 18th century, and it just keeps taking on new relevance. I think for us today, clearly a reminder that that we shouldn't be distracted by surface beauty and everything that dazzles, and that real beauty comes from within. I think we're living another moment where I think that's a message worth imparting, especially to children. When Belle is leaning over the beast and says, "I love you," finally, I think the challenge was, again, in a human way, to make you think these two people, there's nobody else for either of them, And what that meant was, it really was an exploration of how, when Belle is walking through that town in that first scene, how did she get there? And I'm not saying we added stuff before that, but as the movie progresses, you understand what it is that led her and her father there, and also what it is that makes her feel like such an outsider. And the same with the prince, not just, boy, he was nasty that one night, but what turned him into that man who deserved to be cursed, So those are the kinds of things that we fill in the film, and that's what excited me about doing it. Well, I think it was my love of the animated film. I saw it in 1991. I was already in my 20s. I know it means a lot to people who see it when they're a kid, but even at that age, I just thought it was the most beautiful and kind of perfect movie. The question becomes, why remake something that's perfect? That's a whole other thing. But I think it was my love of that film. I think it's dramatically, it's so powerful, and I think all of us feel like the beast at some point or another, So I think that's a way that I certainly connected to it, and the great kind of resolution of it, the fact that he finds kind of the way to his own humanity, I think is such a beautiful story.